everybody, and welcome back to another video by Funland Tutorials. In the previous few videos, we were talking about duality of consumer theory. Basically, we discussed what we can buy using the concept of indifference curve and basically the concept of budget line. So in today's video, we are going to be combining these two graphs, right? So how do we exactly do that? First, there are two ways of doing that. Basically, the fact that there are two ways of doing that is actually the idea of duality. So first, we are going to be talking about something. So let me just write that down. First, we are going to be talking about something which is called the utility maximization, right? So this is the first idea that we are going to be talking about. So utility maximization. Now, what is the idea of utility maximization? Basically, the basic idea is you have some amount of money in your hand, so you get a monthly allowance or a salary or something, and your job is to buy as much commodity as you want so that your utility is maximized. Basically, you're happy. As I said before, think of utility as happiness. So the happier you are, of course, you would want to be happy. So basically your job is to, with the limited amount of resource that you have, the very basic idea of economics, you have limited amount of resources and you want to be as happy as possible. So how do we think of it graphically? Let's go back to our graph. So x on the horizontal axis, y on the vertical axis. We are very good economic students now, so let's not think about chocolates and candies right now. Let's think of it in terms of commodity x and commodity y. So as I mentioned, utility maximization means, so let me just change the color over here a little bit. Utility maximization means M bar. So our first idea comes from the budget line. So budget line M bar was the straight line. So our job is to have a straight line which represents the budget line. So let me just mark this as B dash C. So this is my budget line, which means every point on this commodity bundle and every point on this linear straight line, basically every that represents a different commodity bundle, they all cost the same. That was the idea of budget line. Now, if we think of utility indifference curve of those things, then we can draw a utility curve. Now, this could be a possible utility curve. So you could have u bar 1. So this is one amount of utility curve. This is another amount of utility curve, u bar 2. This is another amount of utility curve, u bar 3. There could be millions, right? There could be things in between as well. Now, let's think about points here. If I think of a point here, so see if I can zoom it a little bit. Okay, we can't. So let me change the color here then. So let's think about, So let's think about the point here. So this point gives you u1 bar amount of utility, and it's also on the cost curve. Now there's this we have to remember that as the utility curve climbs up, so as you move from this utility to this utility, you increase your consumption, right? So points here have this amount, but points here have higher amounts of both the commodities. So you would be more happy, right? You like X and Y, so you would be more happy. So by that logic, very simply, to put it very simply, as you move away from the origin, utility increases. So that means U3, the utility from U3 bar is greater than the utility from U2 bar, which is again greater than the utility from U1 bar. So now the question becomes, we can increase our utility. So our idea was to maximize utility, right? There could be millions and billions of utility curves here as well. So if you think of, let me just limit the diagram once. So suppose this is your graph. So there could be millions of indifference curves here as well. They are drawn very poorly. Let me, if I want to draw them properly, there could be indifference curves here, so on and so forth. There could be so many, right? So our job is to maximize utility. So how far do we climb? Now we bring in the concept of budget. So if we want to be happy, if we think of it realistically, we would want to buy so many things. But what is that one thing that is stopping us from buying everything we want? Money, right? We cannot buy everything we want because we have a budget, we have costs to incur. Had everything been free, we would have bought everything. But nothing is free. There is nothing called a free lunch. So we have a budget, right? So what are the things that we can buy within our budget? If I look at U3, if I look at this indifference curve, let's look at this indifference curve. So I'm looking at this indifference curve. These points, they all make me equally happy. But can I buy them? The question is, can I buy them? These points represent my income. They represent my total income. Points here basically make me spend my entire income. If I am operating here, it means I'm spending my entire income. But if I'm on these points to the bottom, basically to the southwest of my budget line, I am not spending enough. Why? Because suppose this was my total, suppose this is my budget line, right? So if I consume this much amount of y and this much amount of x, I am basically spending my entire income. If I think of a point, say somewhere here, it means I am spending all of the amount that I wanted to buy for x, but I'm buying less of y. That means I should have some money left with me. So points inside, we call these inside. These points are inside, we call them. Let me just write that down. Inside. So these, the points that are inside the budget line, we call, they basically mean that I'm not using my entire income, right? I shouldn't have removed that indifference curve, right? Okay, let me just change the color. The color was red, not pink, so let me just draw that again, right? So that was the idea. The points inside the indifference curve, they mean I am saving basically. There is there is your idea of saving. So you're not spending your entire money. And points on the budget line means I am spending all of it. I'm spending completely all of it. So this was the idea, right? Px no, xppx plus yppy equal to m. So that was the budget line concept. That means if I am somewhere here outside, so that is called outside. So let me just write that down a little bit. Points outside the budget line are, means basically we are overspending. We do not have enough money. Basically they are not feasible. You cannot buy things that you cannot afford, right? You can afford to buy this much amount of x and this much amount of y, but you want to buy this much amount of y. So you cannot buy that much y. So basically all the points outside the budget line are basically not affordable. That is the simplest way of thinking it. So that means this line cannot be bought because all of the points were outside the budget line. This also cannot be bought. All these points cannot be bought, right? These leave us with the indifference curve that at least touch the budget line. You can buy these points, you can buy these points. These points, you're not spending enough money, but you can still afford them. Now, if you, now let us compare between these two indifference curve. First of all, this gives you more indifference utility, right? So let me just remove this, right? So this gives you more indifference curve. So wouldn't you, if I think of it this way, wouldn't you want to buy U2? Now, if you want to buy U2, where should you operate? You should operate within your budget. So it should be somewhere here where it exactly touches the budget line. Why are you not buying this? Because U1 gives you less utility. And our idea is to maximize utility. So you want to climb. Basically, the notion then becomes climb the, if I could leave some space between the two words, climb the highest, so climb the highest possible indifference curve. That is basically the idea. You stay within your budget, but you climb the highest possible indifference curve. In simple terms, you stay within your budget, but you want to buy as much as possible. If you buy things like here, you're buying less than you can, but here you're buying as much as you can. So basically the idea becomes you maximize your utility, you spend as much as possible, and therefore become as happy as possible. while staying within your budget. So the complete problem is that utility maximization subject to means basically given. So let me just write that down for full. Subject to, that is called budget constraint. Budget constraint. So your budget is limited. That is a constraint for you. Constraint means a limitation or a restriction. So you have a restriction placed upon you. You cannot spend more than this. So that is your budget constraint. Given this budget constraint or subject to this budget constraint, you maximize your utility. This is called the utility maximization problem, which is subject to the budget constraint. And this is one way of, okay, well, I am not sure what happened, but this is one way of visualizing what to buy. So our question was what to buy, right? What do we buy? So that this is one way of visualizing what to buy. And as I mentioned before, there's a concept of duality of consumer theory. So if this is one way, there should be another way. So in the next video, I'm going to be talking about the second way of visualizing the exact same topic but in a different